Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Tom returns to his family's remote Idaho cabin, he expects peace. What he finds is a stranger grilling on his porch. What begins as a property dispute spirals into a high-stakes battle against a nationwide scam, hidden identities, and a threat far closer than he ever imagined. It had been nearly 2 years since I last saw the place, and as the wheels of our SUV crunched over the dusty gravel road winding through the Idaho forest, a strange mix of nostalgia and dread tightened in my chest. The pines stood as still as ever, towering like old sentinels around us. I could see the tops of the mountains glinting with late spring snow, my father's land, my grandfather's cabin, and now mine. The home where generations of Hildebrands had hunted, fished, fixed things, and occasionally drank too much whiskey on cold nights. Is that it? Miles, my 10-year-old, pressed his nose against the window. Almost, buddy, I replied, easing off the gas. That's the access road. We'll be there in 5. Sarah, my wife, glanced at me from the passenger seat with a warm smile. You okay? I gave her a nod that was probably more confident than I felt, just thinking how long it's been. And how much Dad would have loved to see it finished. The past year had been a blur of renovation weekends. I drove up from Spokane every other month, staying in town when I couldn't sleep in the unfinished cabin. New roof, solar panels, triple-pane windows, a smart lock system that I'd custom-coded with military-grade encryption just for fun. You could say I take my work as a federal safety engineer seriously, even on vacation. We turned off onto the final stretch, a narrow, rutted trail that curved around a hill and dipped into a clearing. That's when I hit the brakes. There, blocking the trail in front of us, was a jet-black SUV. Big, shiny, urban. Not dusty. Not parked like someone enjoying the woods. No, it was sitting dead center as if guarding the entrance. And beyond it, on the cabin's wraparound deck, were people. Not my people. What the hell? I muttered, shifting into park. The SUV's plate was from Nevada, out of state, not even close. Sarah leaned forward, squinting. Are they grilling? They were. I could see smoke rising from a portable gas grill on the deck. My deck. A man in cargo shorts and flip-flops was turning sausages, beer in hand. Next to him, a woman with sunglasses and an iPad laughed at something on the screen. 2 teenagers sat slouched in folding chairs, faces buried in their phones. I stepped out of the car, slow, cautious, like approaching a strange dog that might bite. The gravel crunched under my boots. Sarah opened her door halfway, but I motioned her to stay put. I didn't want the kids out of the car. Not yet. As I approached the porch, the man looked up, noticed me, and straightened. He put down the tongs, not in a hurry. Afternoon, he called with the kind of casual cheer reserved for someone who thinks they're exactly where they're supposed to be. I didn't answer. I just kept walking until I stood at the base of the stairs, about 10 feet from him. You folks lost? I asked. The man gave me a surprised chuckle. No, we rented this place, through Freedom Stay. Great deal, too. You must be from the caretaker's office. My blood ran cold. No. I'm Tom Hildebrandt. This is my family's cabin, private land, private property. We don't rent it out. Ever. He blinked once, confused, then smirked. Look, buddy, I get it. You probably didn't get the memo, but we've got confirmation. My wife's got the whole thing right here. The woman held up a glowing screen. Sure enough, there was a Freedom Stay digital voucher with check-in dates, a map pin, and even a reservation number. Looked legit. Very official, like something a hotel might send you before a vacation. I could even see a photo of the cabin, my cabin, from about 10 years ago. I clenched my jaw. That listing is fake, I said flatly. I never authorized this. This is not an Airbnb. It's private, and you need to pack up and go. The woman raised an eyebrow behind her sunglasses. Well, that's not our problem. We paid. Non-refundable, too. The man crossed his arms. We're not leaving. Not unless you want to refund us personally. You're trespassing, I snapped. There's no caretaker. I own this land outright. My father's name is on the deed, and now it's mine. The teens barely looked up. I suggest you call whoever you booked through, I added, voice low and cold, because you've been scammed, and you're about 1 beer away from a criminal charge. They didn't move. Not right away. Just exchanged glances like this was a poker hand they weren't ready to fold. You're welcome to sit tight while I call the sheriff, I said. We'll get it sorted. "That a threat?" the man asked, stepping 1 foot down from the deck. "No," I said, eyes locked on his. "That's a promise." I turned and walked back to the car. Behind me, I heard the grill lid slam shut. Inside the SUV, Sarah was already calling the sheriff's office. I slid into the driver's seat, fingers gripping the wheel. Hunched in the back, Haley whispered, "Dad, who are they?" I glanced in the rearview mirror at my daughter's pale face. People who shouldn't be here. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was the beginning of a storm. I didn't sleep much that night. We parked the SUV a few hundred yards down the trail, far enough to keep the kids calm, close enough that I could keep an eye on the cabin. Miles and Haley curled up in the back with sleeping bags, and Sarah tried to rest against the passenger window. I just sat in the driver's seat with the dome light off, watching that damned porch through binoculars like it was enemy territory. They stayed put. The family, if you could even call them that, grilled, laughed, even streamed something on a Bluetooth speaker until after midnight, like they owned the place, like we didn't exist. At one point, the guy stood at the edge of the deck and pissed into the bushes, right where my dad used to stack firewood. I had to grit my teeth to stop myself from getting out. I wasn't going to do anything stupid, not with the kids here, not yet. Morning came with pale light and the distant cry of birds. I waited until I had a signal and called Freedom Stay directly. I wasn't interested in automated menus or chatbots. I wanted blood, or at least someone who could explain how the hell strangers were having a cookout in my dead father's rocking chair. The guy on the line, Mitch or Mike or something equally hollow, sounded sleepy and confused. After spelling my last name twice and giving him the GPS coordinates of the cabin, I heard the soft tapping of a keyboard. Okay, yeah, I see the listing, he said. Property ID 7429B. Says it's registered to a Wade Hillman. I felt my pulse spike. There is no Wade Hillman, I said. At least not one who owns this cabin. Okay. He paused, then continued. It looks like Hillman uploaded documentation last month, a certificate of LLC incorporation, utility records, and, yeah, some older photos of the property. Says it's a hunting cabin on the outskirts of National Park land, claimed to be the managing owner through Hill Park Holdings, LLC. Hill Park Holdings. Jesus. That's a fake LLC, I snapped. He forged documents. I never listed this place. And I'm standing here looking at a family of squatters who claim they booked it through your site. Mitch's tone changed slightly. Sir, I understand your concern. If this is a fraudulent listing, we'll escalate to our Trust and Safety Division. Yeah? How long does that take? A few business days. I don't have a few business days, Mitch. My kids are sleeping in a car because you let someone list my family's home without a shred of verification. There was silence on the line. I want the listing removed. Today. Now. He sighed. I can flag it, but it may take... I hung up. Pointless. By mid-morning, Sarah had taken the kids down to the nearby stream to keep them occupied. I walked back up to the cabin with a clipboard full of property records, hoping maybe, just maybe, reason would work. It didn't. They were still there. The grill was cold, but now they'd moved inside. I heard music playing, classic rock, badly distorted through someone's phone speaker. I knocked on the door. No answer. Knocked again, louder. Finally, the door cracked open and the guy leaned out, shirtless now, eyes bloodshot. You again, he said. Look, I told you. We paid. You want us out? Talk to Freedom Stay. I held up a thick file of paperwork. This is a copy of the deed. My name. My father's before me. Tax records, satellite photos from 6 months ago. GPS coordinates mapped to the federal land boundaries. This is my land, not Hillman's, not Hill Park Holdings. Mine. He stared at me for a second, then let out a small snort. Okay, let's say I believe you. That's still not my fault, right? We booked this fair and square, paid in full, non-refundable. If we leave now, we lose $2,000. You going to reimburse me? I laughed, short and bitter. You think this is about your weekend plans? You broke into a private property. No one broke in, he shot back. We had a key. You had a lock that replaced mine, I said. Someone swapped my smart lock with a cheap Home Depot knob. You want to explain that? He didn't, just shrugged. Behind him, the woman hovered with her arms crossed. She held a printed packet labeled Guest Amenities Checklist. Underneath it, I could see old pictures, my old pictures, from a Facebook post I'd made years ago. Hell, one of them showed my dad sitting on that very porch. They'd pulled them straight off my profile. That was the moment the last ounce of patience left me. You need to leave, now, I said. Or I call the sheriff. At the word sheriff, the guy's jaw tightened. We've got kids, man. So do I said. And I don't let mine trespass. I turned and walked back down the trail. This time I wasn't bluffing. Back in the SUV, I called the county sheriff's office and gave them everything. Location, situation, suspect names, as best I could gather, and the fraudulent rental listing. The dispatcher said they'd send someone out that afternoon. Could be a few hours. Rural response time. Fine by me. I had a cabin to inspect. While we waited, I walked the perimeter, documenting everything. The motion sensor camera above the porch had been ripped clean out of the siding, wires dangling like snapped veins. The side window had scratch marks near the frame, probably pried open before they installed their own lock. Inside the shed, my dad's tool chest had been rummaged through. Some of his old items were missing: a compass, a military-style canteen, and, worst of all, the steel flask with his initials burned into the side. That flask had been in our family since Vietnam. They hadn't just broken into my property, they'd broken into my father's memory. The sheriff showed up just after 2 that afternoon. A single patrol truck rolled up the trail, kicking up dust behind it. The county star on the door looked sun-bleached and cracked. Behind the wheel was a man who could have been cast directly out of a backwoods crime show. Broad-shouldered, mustache, aviators. Name tag, Sheriff D. Carrick. He stepped out, took one look at the cabin, the SUV, me, arms crossed and ready to boil, and let out a long, deliberate exhale. Well, he said, looks like we've got ourselves a situation. No kidding. I gave him the short version while Sarah kept the kids down by the creek. Carrick listened, nodding slowly, the way small-town lawmen do when they're trying to not pick sides too fast. Let's talk to the folks inside, he finally said. We walked up together. The guy, trespasser, squatter, whatever you want to call him, came out again, all faux casual charm. Officer, glad you're here, he started, like he was the one calling for backup. Carrick raised a hand. Let's get some ID, please. And I want to see that rental agreement. The man obliged reluctantly and went inside. A few moments later, the woman emerged with a folder thick enough to rival a mortgage closing. Printed pages, confirmations, a contract signed digitally by Wade Hillman, and a list of amenities so ridiculously specific it included hand-carved banister detail. Carrick flipped through the pages, expression unreadable. I get your concern, ma'am, he said, but these documents don't override property law. If the man behind me is the rightful owner and can prove it, that supersedes any booking, fraudulent or not. That's when the waterworks started. The woman's voice cracked. We didn't know it was fake. We trusted the platform. We paid every cent. We drove 12 hours with our kids for this trip. As if on cue, the 2 teens slouched back onto the porch. One of them, dark-haired sullen, muttered, "We've been here a whole day. He can't just kick us out." The man returned with his ID, Nevada license, and started raising his voice. Look, we've been in the cabin over 24 hours. We've got keys. Food inside. We're not criminals. We're renters. If someone scammed us, that's on them, not us. Carrick looked to me. I said nothing. Just opened the folder I'd brought and handed him everything. Deed copy, death certificate of my father, tax assessments, and printed emails from the Freedom Stay support team confirming no official listing should exist. I also pulled out the linchpin, a laminated copy of the county GIS map with the parcel highlighted, GPS coordinates annotated, and ownership trail notarized. The sheriff took his time flipping through it. Okay, he muttered. That's substantial. He turned back to the squatter. Sir, I'm not saying you knew this was fake, but right now, you're on private land, in a dwelling you have no verifiable right to occupy, and you've altered the security system. That's already criminal trespass, possibly burglary. That did it. The guy's face changed, just a flicker. No more friendly tourist. No more just a dad on vacation. His jaw set. You're siding with him. I'm siding with the law. I want my lawyer. Carrick raised an eyebrow. You're not under arrest. Yet. But I'd recommend not making this worse. The woman jumped in, voice trembling, still clinging to the Victim Act. What about our kids? Where are we supposed to go? You want us to sleep in the car? I stepped in. That's what mine did last night. That shut her up. For a moment, nobody said anything. And then the boy, the same teenager who'd mumbled earlier, spoke up again. Louder this time. He's lying, he said, pointing at me. He just wants the cabin for himself. You're not even the real owner. Anyone can fake documents. Carrick turned to me. You got any proof of entry? Damage? Evidence they broke in? I nodded. Yes, come with me. We walked around the back of the cabin. I pointed out the ripped security camera wires, the gouged lock mount on the window frame, the still visible scratches on the siding. I pulled up the mobile app on my phone, opened the smart lock logs, and scrolled to the last legitimate entry, 2 years ago. After that, nothing. Then, 3 days ago, the system was marked as inactive due to hardware removal. Carrick grunted. Nah, that lines up. Back out front, the guy was pacing. I noticed something else. His SUV's license plate had a tiny rental agency sticker. Suspicious. Carrick noticed too. You drive this up here? He asked. Yeah. Got the rental agreement? The man hesitated. It's in the glove box. I gave Carrick a look. He gave one back. Then something unexpected happened. Carrick's deputy pulled up. A younger guy. Lean, buzz cut, clipboard in hand. He nodded to the sheriff, then to me. Tom, right? I nodded. He gave me a small smile. Jared Foster, big fan of what you've done with the solar upgrades here. Read about your work on hydroslope containment over in Oregon. Impressive stuff. That caught me off guard. Thanks, I said warily. I'll get some statements, photographs, whatever you need. Carrick nodded. Jared, I want a VIN check on that SUV and full documentation on the replacement lock. On it. As he walked off, I glanced at Carrick. He's new. Carrick shrugged. About 8 months. Smart kid. Quiet. Good instincts. For now, Jared seemed like a welcome ally, but something in the back of my mind didn't quite settle. Back inside the cabin, I did one more pass, this time with Jared quietly snapping photos while Carrick dealt with the squatters. On a hunch, I opened the linen closet. Inside, everything looked in order except for one item missing, the fake book I'd used to hide a GPS tracker. Gone. I pulled out my phone, opened the app linked to the tracker embedded inside Dad's old steel flask. Also gone. Signal active. Last pinged less than 30 miles away. Someone had moved it. Recently. Whoever these people were, they weren't just unlucky tourists. And they'd taken more than just time and space. They'd taken something personal. And now, I had a trail. I sat in the front seat of the SUV with the engine off, watching the GPS tracker pulse on my phone screen like a heartbeat. That flask, my dad's flask, was pinging from a motel just outside the town of Avery, tucked between a gas station and a liquor store, about 28 miles from the cabin. That didn't make sense. If the squatters had just shown up the night before, why was something that belonged to me sitting in a seedy roadside inn? It meant one of two things. Either someone had come ahead to scout, or this wasn't their first rodeo. I looked over at Jared Foster, who stood nearby, flipping through the photographs he'd taken on a small department-issued tablet. He was efficient, polite, and just a little too smooth. The compliment earlier about my hydro-slope engineering work had landed oddly. Sure, I'd spoken at conferences, but it wasn't exactly dinner party material. You ever see stuff like this before? I asked, trying to sound casual. He didn't look up. Fake listings? Sure. Usually it's some desperate family crashing a foreclosed house in town. But out here, remote cabins. Not common. He finally looked at me. His smile was tight. Then again, not everyone has a cabin like yours. I let that hang in the air. Jared returned to his work. Meanwhile, Carrick was inside with the squatter family, explaining the situation, apparently for the third time, judging by the tone of his voice. The woman had started crying again, though the effort was clearly losing steam. I waited until Jared wandered toward the patrol car, then slipped away and walked into the woods behind the shed. I needed air, and to think, and to not scream. Once out of sight, I pulled out my backup phone, a small burner I kept for work when I didn't want my main line tracked or interfered with. I accessed the second GPS system, the one I'd rigged myself into the electrical panel. It wasn't fancy, just a ping device wired into the breaker box, invisible unless you knew exactly what to look for. Still online. Good. But something else jumped out. Another ping. This one was moving. Not the flask, not the panel. A third signal from the backup toolkit I'd hidden in the crawl space. It was active, and it was moving west. I stared at the screen. Someone had already been here, and they'd taken gear. Not just vacationers, not just opportunists. This was a damn operation. I marched back toward the cabin just as Carrick stepped out onto the porch. We're going to need to separate these folks, he said, rubbing his temples. The woman says she was just following her husband. The husband says they were duped. The boy's twitchy. The boy. Right. I hadn't paid much attention to him before. The younger of the two kids, maybe 15. Messy black hair, black hoodie, jeans too clean for someone supposedly hiking through Idaho. When Carrick walked back inside, I took a slow walk over to the side of the house. The boy was sitting on a stump, earbuds in, head down, staring at the dirt. "Hey," I said. He looked up, pulled one earbud out. "What?" "You like the cabin?" I asked, careful not to sound threatening. He shrugged. "It's fine. First time doing this." He didn't answer. I nodded. "Yeah, I figured." Silence. Then, just as I turned to leave, he said, "My name's not Alex." I stopped, turned back. He stood up slowly, pulling a piece of paper from his pocket. Crumpled, sweaty. He handed it to me without a word, then sat back down and put his earbuds back in. I unfolded the paper, scrawled in pen in shaky handwriting. "I didn't want to come. My dad said it's just temporary, like before. Password is sundog428. He talks to Wade through Mom's old email. Sorry." I looked at the kid. He didn't glance back. Inside the house, the adults were still protesting, still trying to guilt their way out. But the kid, he knew, and he was cracking. I stepped away, pulled out my phone again, and logged into the email address he'd mentioned. Took a few tries, but with the password, I was in. And there it was. Dozens of messages between the mother and Wade Hillman. Some casual, some business, some downright incriminating. Payment splits, tips on what props to bring to make the fake rental look authentic, lists of targets. The phrase high-value remote appeared multiple times. I took screenshots of everything and forwarded them to myself and to Carrick. If this was a scam, it wasn't a one-off. It was a traveling grift with a damn paper trail. By the time I rejoined the sheriff, he was on the radio with the county prosecutor. "I don't care if they're not locals," he was saying. "I've got probable cause, I've got physical evidence, and I've got motive. That's enough to hold them for questioning." When he saw me, he raised an eyebrow. "Something else?" I handed him the paper. He read it, then glanced toward the boy. "I'll have someone talk to him separately," he said quietly. "Thanks." Just then, Jared approached from the far side of the cabin, holding a tablet. "Sheriff," he called out. "VIN check confirms the SUV was rented with a prepaid Visa under the name Paul Reaver. Not the same as the guy inside. The email used, registered to W. Hillman." Carrick's eyes narrowed. "Jesus. It's all connected." He turned to the family, now sitting on the porch like kids caught with a broken window. "Folks," he said, voice firm, "you're not going anywhere." The arrest wasn't loud. There were no handcuffs slammed onto wrists, no screaming, no dramatic takedown in the dirt. Just quiet commands, some resistance, and then the distinct click of restraint. Sheriff Carrick was all business. He read them their rights in that flat, weary tone used by men who've done this too many times. The man, real name still unconfirmed, didn't even flinch when the cuffs went on. He just kept muttering about lawyers and entrapment and, "You'll be hearing from corporate." The woman cried, then stopped. The teens said nothing, except the boy, the one who wasn't really Alex. He gave me a small nod as Carrick walked him to the patrol car. I didn't nod back. I just watched. Freedom Stay called me an hour later, the actual legal team this time, not Mitch the chatbot with a headset. The rep, Sarah with no H, sounded like she'd had a very bad morning. "We're deeply sorry, Mr. Hildebrandt," she said, voice taut and rehearsed. "We've identified the listing as fraudulent and terminated the associated accounts." "There were multiple," I said. "Accounts, not just one." "Yes," she admitted. 342 to be exact. Created under dozens of IP addresses, most rerouted through a VPN farm based in I don't care where, I cut in. "I want to know how a forged LLC and a few stock photos got through your verification system." Another pause. "We're reviewing that. For now, we're issuing a full reimbursement to your account for all damages. There will also be a public statement. We understand if you intend to pursue legal action." I didn't answer, just let the silence stew. "We're cooperating fully with local law enforcement," she added, and the individual identified as Wade Hillman was arrested earlier today in Texas. 14 similar incidents tied to his network. Your case helped link it all together. That last part made me pause. So this really was a network, a pattern, not just unlucky timing. We were bait. By evening, the family was booked into the county jail. Sheriff Carrick gave me a printed copy of the intake report. 3 counts of criminal trespass, 2 of conspiracy to commit fraud, and 1 count of evidence tampering. The fake documents hadn't just been misleading. They had forged digital signatures from a notary in Nevada who didn't exist. Later, as I was walking the perimeter again, checking the damaged shed, I heard footsteps behind me. It was Jared. "I owe you something," he said. I turned. "What's that?" He held up a black canvas pouch. Inside, my father's flask. "Found it in the kid's backpack," he said, "wrapped in a towel." My breath caught. The steel felt cold in my hands, familiar in a way that hit harder than I expected. "Appreciate it," I muttered. Jared shifted awkwardly. "You did good today." "Kept your head straight." I nodded, though something in me still twisted when I looked at him. That nagging feeling hadn't left. That night, after Sarah and the kids were finally tucked into real beds inside the cabin, I sat alone on the deck, flask in hand, staring into the trees. I replayed the timeline, the replacement of the lock, the erased camera, the targeted photos, the kid's note, the rental car. Too smooth, too rehearsed, too practiced. I opened the GPS tracking app again just to double-check everything. The flask was back online at my coordinates. The breaker box pinged fine. The third tracker, the one in the toolkit, was now dead. It had stopped pinging 20 minutes after I found the flask. Only one person had known about the toolkit. Only one person had taken photographs in that room. Jared Foster. The realization hit like ice down my spine. It wasn't just Wade Hillman pulling strings from afar. Someone local had to facilitate. Help prep the ground, provide access. I opened my encrypted file vault and started compiling. Photos of Jared near the shed, metadata from the images, audio clips of his comments to me, innocent on the surface but suspicious in hindsight. And the nail in the coffin. I dug through the Freedom Stay emails and found a user account created under the email. That wasn't Wade's. But the recovery phone number? It was Idaho-based. I opened my contact list. Jared Foster, same last 4 digits. And just like that, I knew. We weren't at the end. Not even close. I didn't sleep that night either. Not from fear, from calculation. The evidence I'd gathered against Jared Foster wasn't bulletproof yet, but it was close. Close enough to make my gut twist and my mind refuse to rest. The local deputy, the quiet observer, the man who just wanted to help. He'd been in the right places at the right times. Too right. And now I had more than suspicion. I had patterns, access, timing, connections. By sunrise, I had a full folder, documents, screen captures, tracker logs. I encrypted the whole thing and sent it to my off-site cloud vault. Then I sent a pared-down version to Sheriff Carrick with a simple message. "We need to talk. Privately. Urgent." I got no reply. At 7:45, I called the sheriff's office. Dispatcher said Carrick was out on a call. I asked when he'd be back. She hesitated. He didn't say. That was the first red flag. The second came 10 minutes later. I got a call from Jared. "Hey, Tom," he said, voice chipper. "I was thinking maybe I swing by the cabin later just to check on the locks. Make sure there's no tampering. Sheriff's been tied up. Figured I'd give you a hand." My spine stiffened. That's considerate. Just trying to make sure you and your family feel safe. You've had a hell of a few days." "You have no idea," I said, keeping my tone flat. "Sure. Come by around 10. "Sounds good, partner." I hung up. Partner? Hell no. I told Sarah to take the kids down to town, get ice cream, anything. Just be gone for the day. She didn't ask questions. Not anymore. She'd seen the change in my face. At 9:55, Jared pulled up in the same county truck. Uniform crisp, badge gleaming, mirrored sunglasses on like nothing had changed. "Tom," he called out, stepping onto the porch like we were old fishing buddies. "Man, you did some serious work on this place." "I get obsessive," I said, waving him inside. I let him walk into the main room, closed the door, locked it. He noticed. "Everything okay?" I didn't answer. I pulled out my phone and placed it face up on the table, screen recording already live. Then I laid out the printed email metadata and tracker logs. "Want to explain why a Proton mail account tied to one of Wade Hillman's aliases lists your county-registered phone number as a recovery line?" He froze. Just a moment. A flicker. Then, smile still on, he said, "That's one hell of an accusation." "Here's one hell of a coincidence," I said, tossing down the rental record for a sedan parked 2 towns over, used 3 weeks ago to scout wilderness cabins, with dash cam footage, showing Jared's face at a gas station outside Spokane. He didn't smile anymore. "I could arrest you for harassment right now," he said, stepping closer. His voice dropped. "You really want to open that box?" I didn't move. "Funny thing about smart homes," I said, nodding to the solar panel system humming above us. "They record everything. The facial scans from the new doorbell I installed last year. They picked up a familiar face on the porch 2 nights ago. Before the family ever arrived." He blinked. "You tripped the motion sensor," I said. "That's how I knew someone was prepping the place before they moved in." He looked around the room. Too fast. Then he sighed, and just like that, the act dropped. "All right," he said. "So what now? You think anyone up the chain's going to take your word over mine? You think Carrick hasn't looked the other way before?" I stepped forward. "I don't need Carrick," I said. "I've already sent the files to state-level authorities and the press. You're part of a cross-state fraud ring tied to a fugitive. You're not just dirty, you're sloppy." His lip twitched. For a second, I thought he might swing. Instead, he turned, fast, and reached for his belt. I was faster. The old bear spray canister I kept in the wall locker was in my hand before he cleared his holster. I hit him full blast. He screamed, dropped to his knees, clawing at his face. I kicked the gun away, then pulled out the satellite phone I'd stashed during renovations, one of those paranoid engineer toys I never thought I'd need. It had a direct line to the regional FBI field office, a courtesy from a safety project I'd consulted on years ago. "This is Thomas Hildebrandt," I said when the agent answered. "I have information and a detained suspect in an ongoing multi-state fraud and corruption case involving impersonation, conspiracy, and a member of local law enforcement. I need a team here, now." They didn't ask many questions. 30 minutes later, 3 black Suburbans rolled up the trail. Foster was cuffed, processed, and loaded into the back without ceremony. He didn't say a word, just stared at me through swollen, bloodshot eyes. Carrick finally showed up after the fact. He stood next to me while the agents packed evidence into boxes. "You really stirred the pot," he muttered. "Some pots need stirring." He nodded slowly. "Don't know how deep this thing runs yet." "You will," I said. I handed him the last copy of the evidence binder, my backup. "This goes higher," I said. "You and I both know it." He didn't deny it. As the agents rolled out, one of them shook my hand. "Hell of a job, Mr. Hildebrandt," she said. "You just cracked a 5-state fraud network." I watched the caravan disappear into the trees, and for the first time in days, the cabin felt mine again. The cabin was quiet again. Too quiet. For the first time in days, no SUV idled outside. No teenagers cluttered the deck with fast food wrappers. No strangers grilled sausages on my father's porch. The place felt still, like the woods themselves were exhaling. But inside me, there was no peace. Just a restless buzz, like an engine still running hot after the vehicles stopped. FBI agents had swept through, packed up hard drives, paper trails, even the dented can of bear spray I'd used on Foster, now considered evidence. The family had been formally charged. Wade Hillman was in federal custody. And Foster. Last I heard, he was sitting in a secure holding cell in Coeur d'Alene, screaming about entrapment and entitled landowners. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I was walking room to room with a clipboard and a roll of blue painter's tape, marking every spot where something had been taken, broken, or just felt off. The place was mine again, sure, but it wasn't whole. The camera mounts were still dangling. The smart lock, long gone, had been replaced with a basic deadbolt by Carrick's crew. Functional, but insulting. Worst of all, my dad's tools. Some of them were just gone, pawned, lost. A legacy turned to quick cash. I opened the shed and stood there for a while, staring at the empty hooks where his gear used to hang, the wrench with his name etched into the handle, the old multimeter he'd taught me to use when I was 10, all gone. That night, after Sarah and the kids returned from town, we sat on the deck under a sky full of stars. The kids were quiet. Sarah had that look, the one she wore when she wanted to say something, but knew I needed silence. After they went to bed, I stayed outside, staring into the trees. I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I drove into town and visited the hardware store, the electronics shop, and the county courthouse. By the end of the day, I had 3 new motion sensor cameras, a backup generator for the solar grid, a signal repeater for the satellite phone, and a stack of "No Trespassing, Private Property, Surveillance in Use" signs printed in red and black. I wasn't just repairing, I was reinforcing. Over the next week, I rebuilt, reinforced the window frames with internal steel rods, rewired the camera system with redundancy, hid backup GPS trackers in new locations. I even bought a small perimeter drone system. Ridiculous, maybe, but this was no longer just a vacation home. This was a line in the sand. I also hired a surveyor, licensed and local, to officially re-verify every inch of the property boundary. I wasn't about to let someone challenge ownership ever again. I had the new maps notarized, scanned, and sent to both county and federal records. I filed a civil claim against Hillman's LLC, which, as it turned out, was just a shell entity. But through discovery, I was able to trace some assets, including 2 cryptocurrency wallets tied to prior rental scams. My lawyer told me it might take months, even years, but restitution was likely. It wasn't about the money. It was about cleaning the blood off the blade. Then came the email from Freedom Stay's legal department. They were issuing a formal apology, publicly. My case was now listed as a warning on their website. A full page dedicated to combating remote property fraud, featuring my story, redacted but clear. They'd banned over 300 fake accounts, implemented new protocols for listing verification, including LLC ownership validation, cross-referenced parcel ID checks, and biometric logins for new hosts. Too little, too late, but it was something. I got a call from a local news station, then a regional paper, then NPR. I declined all of them. I didn't want to be the guy who got scammed. I wanted to be the guy who fought back. A week after the last agent left, I returned to the edge of the access road and hammered in a new wooden signpost. Took me 3 hours to carve it by hand. Burned the letters in with a soldering iron I found in Dad's old toolbox, the one tool they didn't take. When I was done, it read, "This cabin was built by a man who believed in honesty, effort, and consequences. If you're reading this and don't belong here, turn around or stay and meet what comes next." And beneath that, in small letters, "We don't call the cops. We call the owner." I stepped back and looked at it. It wasn't just a warning. It was a declaration. It was early October when the envelope arrived. No return address. Just my name, typed cleanly, and my physical cabin address. Not the P.O. box I use for everything. That alone set my teeth on edge. I opened it with a knife. Something about it felt too deliberate for fingers, and slid out a single folded letter and a USB drive taped inside. The letter was printed, no signature, just 5 typed lines. "You got lucky. This isn't over. You're not the only one who watches. W.H. Wade Hillman, either from jail or through someone on the outside." I turned the USB over in my hand, half expecting it to explode. Then I got up, walked to the workbench in the shed, and plugged it into the hardened laptop I kept offline. My dirty system for analyzing malware, blueprints, and federal risk models. The drive contained 3 files. One was a map, a digital satellite image with 5 marked coordinates, all cabins, all remote. One of them was mine. The second was a spreadsheet labeled Revenue Cycle. It detailed fake bookings, target profiles, timing gaps between bookings and takedowns, all with notes referencing individuals by aliases. The third, a folder of photographs. Some I recognized, old photos from my own social media, scraped and re-uploaded, but others were new. Too new. There was one of me hammering the new sign into the ground last week. Another showed Sarah and the kids walking to the creek. And then, the worst, one of me asleep on the porch, head back, flask resting on my chest. That one was taken from less than 15 feet away. Someone had been here, recently. I ran to the closet, pulled out the camera system logs, the backup micro SD card, the drone flight paths, and saw nothing. Clean. Wiped. Whoever it was knew what they were doing, or worse, had access. I immediately activated the fallback, a closed-channel signal beacon that pinged the FBI's cybercrimes unit with a pre-coded alert. I'd installed it after the last raid just in case. 2 hours later, I got a callback from Agent Sinclair, one of the women who'd helped arrest Foster. "You were right to hit the trigger," she said, her voice tighter than usual. "We just intercepted chatter from a private Discord server used by Hillman's network. Someone posted a bounty." "A bounty? Not money," she clarified. "Access. They're trading location coordinates and details on remote homes with vulnerable security systems. You've been flagged as a high-value deflector. Basically, they hate you." "Good," I said, then paused. "So, what now?" "We're working with DOJ to build conspiracy charges against everyone tied to the server, but it'll take time. In the meantime," she hesitated, then softened, "you should consider hiring private security." I almost laughed. That was the moment I realized I'd become the kind of person who needs private security because a fake rental mafia had marked my cabin as a target for revenge. No, I wasn't going to live in fear, not in the place my father built, not in the woods that raised me. So I did the opposite. I went to town and filed for my own LLC, a real one, Hildebrandt Mountain Shield, LLC. Purpose: counter-fraud security consultancy specializing in rural property protection. Then I bought 3 more hidden cameras, a reinforced storm door, and commissioned a metal worker to build a wrought iron gate across the trail entrance. It wasn't about paranoia, it was about ownership. I contacted a journalist from the Seattle Times, the only one who'd written about this scam with real attention to detail, and gave them the full story. I even gave them the photos, the USB contents, the threats. The article went viral in 48 hours. The man who trapped the rental mafia. They called me the homeowner who fought back and the last line between tech bros and the woods. I hated the attention, but I loved what came after. Freedom Stay offered me a permanent position on their new fraud review board. I declined, but I did accept one thing. They asked if I'd write a guide for remote property owners. I called it Don't Rent to Ghosts, a realist's guide to not getting screwed. It wasn't just a guide. It was a message. And at the very end, I added this. If you're thinking about coming to my cabin without permission, just remember, you're not the first. You won't be the last, but I'll still be here, watching and waiting. You may find a cabin, but you'll need a fortress.